Hey everybody, the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer just dropped, and we're gonna break it down right here, right now. Let's get started. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Hello folks, I'm Andrew Fantasia. Thank you so much for tuning in. As usual, if you enjoy this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. You know what? I'm gonna be straight with you right now. Of the 3 Marvel films that are gonna be coming out this year, we've seen trailers for all of them now. I think this was my favorite one. It was pretty damn fun, but let's dive right into it. Let's tackle this puppy. Here we go. The trailer starts with Spider-Man at some kind of fundraiser. Looks like he's just doing good things, helping the people of New York, which is great. That's totally a thing Spidey would do. And he's got Aunt May with him, backing him up. She's like his sidekick. She's like the Alfred to his Batman, kind of like how she was in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's nice to see that she's warmed up to the fact that her nephew's Spider-Man now, and they're just kicking ass and taking names together as a team. That warms my heart. There's also this nice flirty little exchange between Aunt May and Happy Hogan, and Happy looks pretty smitten with her, but I guess we'll have to wait and see whether or not Aunt May has mutual feelings, because as Homecoming showed us, everybody is smitten with Aunt May. And I mean, when she's Marissa Tomei, can you blame us? Can you really blame us? So he's getting all packed up for a trip to Europe with his friends. He's got Ned with him. He's got MJ with him. He's got Flash, a couple of the other kids from school. I like that. The dynamic, the relationship between all the kids in Peter Parker's school was what made the first one so much fun. And just the way those kids all interacted with one another was just absolutely spellbinding, and I loved watching it. And I know we all loved watching it because we couldn't get enough of Spider-Man Homecoming. So I'm glad that they kept that dynamic there. The kids are still there. They're going on this trip together. Let me just say this. I wish, I don't know about y'all, but my high school didn't take us on fancy schmancy trips to like London and Venice. And I mean, there were some nice trips. There was an Italy trip at one point that you could take. There was a China trip. But it looks like these kids are getting like a full tour of Europe. And I've got to say, for a little, high school in Queens, that's an impressive feat. Now, Peter's packing for this trip. He's excited. He's getting ready. But he doesn't bring his Spider-Man costume. Because as he puts it in the trailer, Europe doesn't need a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It makes sense to me. I mean, Peter is not shrugging off his responsibility. He's just saying, I've done a lot of hard work here in the city. I've done a lot of good work. Now I just want, a couple of weeks to just relax with my friends. I'm not the only superhero in the world. I just want to chill out with my friends and enjoy Europe. I just want to not be Spider-Man for 2 weeks. That makes perfect sense to me. I get it, Peter. I feel you, buddy. Go ahead. Go enjoy Europe. And he does enjoy Europe, at least for a little bit. We see they're seeing the sights in London and in Venice, and I think they hit a few other stops too, which is neat. I can't wait to see all the different cities they go to. And Peter is starting to get a little bit more affectionate towards MJ and vice versa. So the Peter-MJ relationship is there, and that's neat. That's going to be fun to see that play out. So they do enjoy Europe for a short amount of time, but then, responsibility comes knocking on Peter's door in the form of, who else? Mr. Nicholas Jonathan Johann Sebastian Fury. I might be making one of those up. There he is. Nick Fury is back doing what Nick Fury does best. I love how, throughout Phase 2 and most of Phase 3 of the MCU, Nick Fury was just kind of out of commission. After Winter Soldier, he faked his death and all that, and then, he popped up in Ultron, and then we just didn't see him for the longest time. But now he shows up in the end of Infinity War. We know he's going to be in Captain Marvel. We're pretty certain he's going to be in Endgame, and now he's just, front and center again in Spider-Man Far From Home. Nick Fury's back, baby. He's back in the MCU full force. I missed him. It's nice to see the guy back, and I swear, this man doesn't age. He looks exactly the same as he did at the end of Iron Man 1. Samuel L. Jackson, my friend, I want some of the water that you are drinking, sir. So Mr. Fury recruits Spider-Man to help him take down some very bad people who are making Europe a very dangerous place. And those very bad people come in the form of the Elementals. Now, my personal exposure to the Spider-Man lore came in the form of the Fleer Ultra trading cards from like 1992, and from the Fox Kids 90s animated series, primarily that one. So that's where, Spider-Man really hits home for me. So when it comes to the really, really obscure folks like the Elementals, all I have to go on is what I've read on the backs of these trading cards and what I've seen possibly in the cartoon. So they're not the most A-list Spider-Man villains. They're not even B-list Spider-Man villains. They're probably C at best. But what's interesting here is that Marvel is so good at this. Marvel is so good at taking villains that nobody really ever talked about, pushing them to the forefront, and making them cool. I mean, unless you were a hardcore Thor fan, you probably didn't know who Hela was. Now we all know who Hela is. We all know who Ironmonger is now. We all know Malekith. Okay, maybe that's a bad example. But what I'm trying to say is that the Elementals would not have been my first choice for villains, but I really like the way they're being displayed here, and I think that they're going to give us something interesting. I don't think that the movie's just going to give us a bunch of cheap, watered-down, giant things. Now, I think I can identify most of these folks here. This one is the one I'm most familiar with right here. We got Hydro Man. And Hydro Man is, again, somebody I know mostly from when Rob Paulsen played him in the animated series. And there he was a guy who was from Mary Jane's past. He was her high school boyfriend, and he was crazy and murderous. And he could turn himself into water and do all kinds of crazy water-based shit. This over here is Molten Man, and this I know because I had the Molten Man trading card, and, you know, the trading cards were kind of my thing. And from what I remember, he is the brother of a girl that's friends with Peter, a girl by the name of Liz Allen. In the original sort of Spidey canon, Liz Allen's brother became the Molten Man, and, you know, he was covered in this goopy, red-hot, orange, molten kind of thing. That's really all I know about him. And he's sort of like, not a villain per se, but he's just like, he can't control himself and he just gets really mad and breaks shit. That's probably why he didn't take off as a very popular villain. But that's Molten Man, so he's there. Now this one here, we all want to think Sandman, don't we? I mean, especially the way Sandman looked in certain parts of Spider-Man 3. And that looks like a sandy area he's standing in. And we got Nick Fury and what I hope is my girl Maria Hill shooting at him. So I'm going to assume this is Sandman. I can't think of anybody else it would be. Granted, I don't know the Elementals all that well. Maybe there's somebody else. Again, I know through the trading cards there was a character named Sandstorm. Maybe this is Sandstorm. But I kind of hope it's Sandman because, you know, he is A-list Spider-Man villain, and sneaking him in there would be pretty neat. Now, since Peter didn't pack his suit, how's he going to fight all these guys? Well, it looks like Nick Fury is giving him a new S.H.I.E.L.D.-approved Spider-Man suit, and this one is red and black rather than red and blue. You can see it pretty clearly here in this shot when Spider-Man's swinging around. I remember the red and black in a handful of, you know, pictures from the comics, and I think I even had an action figure where Spider-Man was red and black. So this is a suit that we're all kind of familiar with throughout the years. But we also see another suit in this film, which is kind of neat. We see this stealth suit that I remember we had been promised over the past few months that this was going to end up in the movie. And, I mean, look at that. That looks just like Spider-Man Noir, baby. He's got the white goggles. He's all in black. And I like the look of it. I would have been totally happy if this was his only alternate suit, and then, you know, he switches between this and the red and blue. But the red and black is fine, too. It's just not my favorite. But I like that we have, you know, this is a Spider-Man tradition. He's always been a guy who changes suits at a drop of a hat. You know, he's got a lot of suits, this man. So to see him in a couple of different ones is pretty peachy, and I like it a lot. I just hope that we get the red and blue for the climactic showdown of the film, because it's just the most beautiful one. Speaking of that climactic showdown, who is it going to be against? Who is the final boss, if you will, of Spider-Man Far From Home? Because it looks like it's full of a bunch of mini-bosses. Well, I'm hoping that it's this gentleman right here, because yes, ladies and gents, boys and girls, we finally got our first good official look at Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. Hallelujah. He looks great. I mean, look at that costume design, man. This is what I've been looking forward to more than anything else about this movie, is the costume design on Mysterio. He looks fantastic, and then to top it off, he jumps into the fray. He tells Spider-Man, hey, you don't want to get involved with this, and he starts fighting with Hydro Man. And he's got the Fishbowl helmet on, and it still looks amazing. I'm sorry, I'm just giddy right now, because I never thought I'd see the day where I'd get to see live action Mysterio on the big screen with the fishbowl and that he would look good. I keep thinking back to like early 2000s in the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, and how I know for a fact that back then if Mysterio had shown up, they would not have used the fishbowl because they were trying to be, edgy and modern with the costumes, and they would have just had him, in green, maybe with a purple cape if we're lucky, maybe, and then maybe like he would have been walking through his secret lair and we would have seen the fishbowl like on a shelf somewhere in the background as an Easter egg, and that would have been it. But nah, that's not how the MCU rules, sweetheart. We got the fishbowl right where it should be, on the man's head. Perfect. Thank you so much, Marvel. Thank you, costume designers. Bless you. Bless you. So after I got over the initial shock that I was seeing Mysterio, fishbowl and all, fighting with Hydro Man, then I could finally start speculating about what we might expect in this movie. These elementals, whether or not there's real people in there, these elementals are going to be under the control of Mysterio himself. He wants to be a hero. He wants limelight, fame, fortune, the way we see Spider-Man being a hero in the beginning of this trailer, getting giant checks for charities and stuff. I feel like Mysterio saw that and said, I want that, but I want it for myself. With great power comes great greed. What he devised is this master plan to create these giant monsters. They're tearing up the city and they're doing horrible things, and everybody in Europe is like, oh no, sacre bleu, what do we do? And then Mysterio shows up and is like, don't worry folks, I'll save the day. And he shuts down these monsters that he helped create, so it's a cinch for him. He just has to wave his hands and pretend he's doing something spectacular when really it's just a light show coming out of those gloves. And then everybody praises him. He becomes a hero. He becomes rich, famous, gets whatever he desires. That's his end game. That's what I think's going to happen here. And that's so Mysterio. He's the kind of guy who, the special effects wizard, he fakes things, he creates illusions. What grander illusion could there be than, 3 giant monsters terrorizing 3 cities, and he shows up to, quote-unquote, save the day. That's where I think this is going. I'm sure a lot of other people feel the same way. What do you think? Do you think that that's Mysterio's master plan? Whatever happens, this movie is going to turn out to be one big, epic monstrosity of a Spider-Man tale, and I can't wait till we can sink our teeth into it on July 5th. So that was my breakdown of the Spider-Man Far From Home teaser. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you here next time, folks, and until then, adios.